Finally, the long-awaited morning arrived. Harry's eyes were heavy, and his head was burdened by a sleepless night. However, the first rays of the sun, piercing through the tree canopies, brought him alertness and infused a certain dose of optimism. Harry approached Emily, who was peacefully dozing on the couch. She had finally managed to fall asleep in the early hours, and he decided not to wake her, thinking it was still too early to leave the room and better to wait until it got brighter. Throughout the night, he reconsidered many things, and by morning, he had a plan for further actions. First and foremost, he needed to go to the second floor and retrieve the car keys and some personal belongings from the bedroom. It might not be possible to carry heavy bags and a suitcase right away because he needed his hands to be as free as possible for self-defense. After that, they needed to leave immediately. The most important thing was to ensure Emily's safety. He would return here with the police. Time dragged on very slowly. Harry was getting increasingly nervous, and it wasn't yet as bright outside as he had planned. Additionally, he really needed to use the bathroom. His bladder demanded decisive action because the volume of water that had migrated from the 10-liter canister to Harry's stomach clearly did not fit there. He had been drinking water all night, probably due to nervousness, and there was no more wine. Moreover, the wine itself had dried his mouth too much. However, he couldn't bring himself to wake Emily. She looked so sweet and defenseless in this gloomy and large house. He lovingly looked at his girlfriend and decided that nothing terrible would happen if he quickly darted out of the room and made it to the bathroom, which was right here on the first floor. Running just 10 meters wouldn't be a big deal. He did just that. Quietly pushing the chair away from the door, he cracked it open and cautiously peered outside. The large fireplace room was dimly lit, with sunlight just beginning to penetrate through the loosely closed curtains. Gathering his courage, he started moving, holding a metal poker in his right hand and a gun in his left. Slipping out of the room, he closed the door behind him and, trying not to make any noise, began making his way to the bathroom. Moving quickly wasn't an option. It was too dark in the room, and Harry decided not to take any risks. Arriving at his destination without incident and using the bathroom as intended, he felt much better. A daring thought crossed his mind. What if he quickly went to the bedroom on the second floor and put an end to all of this? With the car keys, he could quickly get Emily out of here, and they wouldn't have to linger for several more hours in this frightening house. Peeking his head out of the bathroom door and looking around once again, he started slowly but energetically making his way to the staircase on the second floor. Sneaking up to it, he saw the cause of yesterday's terrible crash. It was a massive oak grandfather's chest. He remembered it from childhood. His grandfather used to store many interesting things in it. As a child, Harry often rummaged through the drawers of this chest when his grandfather wasn't home. However, now the chest was empty. It had partially broken from the impact, and some drawers lay scattered nearby. Carefully maneuvering around the broken furniture, he began ascending the stairs. Climbing up, he looked around attentively and listened for the slightest sound. Reaching the door he needed, he slowly started turning the handle, and as he cracked it open, he peered into the dark room. However, it was very dark inside. The curtains on the windows were tightly closed. Then, wide opening the door, with a racing heart, he stepped inside. Everything was fine. There was no one in the room, and Harry breathed a sigh of relief. He quickly approached the windows and began to pull apart the curtains, letting sunlight into the room. At that moment, when he was already relaxed and had pulled the last curtain open, a sound echoed behind him, the bedroom door closing. Startled, he jumped, and a shiver of fear ran through his entire body. He rushed to the door and started pulling on the handle, but the door was locked. Someone had locked it. Suddenly, a terrified scream echoed from below. It was a woman's scream of horror. And it was Emily screaming. Out of frustration, Harry kicked the door several times, but the old oak door easily withstood the blows. Then he remembered the gun he still held in his hand. He quickly removed the safety and aimed at the area around the door lock. A shot rang out, then another. One bullet ricocheted off the wall, narrowly missing Harry. Despite this, his efforts were successful, and the door gave way. Our shooter swung open the door, already rushing out of the room, suddenly remembering the car keys. He had to run back, fortunately finding them right there on the bed, in Emily's purse. Losing a few precious seconds, He immediately dashed back into the corridor. Upon reaching the corridor, he was stunned. A large, dark figure stood at the end of the hallway. But there was no time for contemplation, and forgetting about the danger, he charged towards the stranger. The stranger, turning his back to Harry, slowly moved away from him down the stairs. In the semi-darkness of the house, Harry didn't notice an obstacle lying at his feet and stumbled over it, sprawling to his full height. He painfully hit his knee and elbows on the wooden floor, dropping the gun in the process. While he got up and searched for his weapon, the stranger was already downstairs. Holding on to the staircase railing, Harry quickly jumped over the steps, trying to catch up with the uninvited guest. However, something flashed from the side, a shadow, and a light gust of cold air sent a shiver down Harry's face. He turned around and saw another shadow slipping from under the stairs into the dark corner of the fireplace room. Harry mechanically raised the gun and fired at the elusive black figure. The sound of shattering glass echoed. The bullet passed through the dark silhouette hovering above the parquet floor, causing no harm but breaking the window glass. The sound of broken glass reminded Harry of the second uninvited character, and when he turned his head, he saw him at the door of the room where Emily was. Without a second thought, he began shooting at the massive black back, entering the open doorway of the ghostly room. Ghosts or whoever they were definitely not human. 5 or 6 bullets from the Beretta did not harm the creature in the slightest. They passed through it, and Harry saw the bullets embedding into the plaster of the brick wall, raising little fountains of white dust. A terrible scream erupted from the room. It was his girlfriend screaming. A horrifying thought crept into Harry's consciousness. Did one of the bullets hit her? He pushed away this dreadful thought, but since she was screaming, she must still be alive. Adrenaline surged through his blood. His heart pounded furiously, each beat echoing in his temples. There was a haze before his eyes. On unsteady legs, he quickly ran to the room, and when he finally reached it, he was met with the following scene: Emily, standing like a statue in the corner of the room, pale as chalk, and a few steps away from her, a ghostly figure hovering above the floor, dressed in a black cloak. Without hesitation, Harry leaped with a shout at it, aiming a punch where the head of the ghost should have been. Just like with the bullets, he passed through the entity and crashed into the table standing in the middle of the room. Feeling no pain from the unsuccessful landing, he immediately jumped to his feet and began throwing everything at the shadow with the cloak that he could find: empty wine bottles, an unfinished water canister, a gun with an empty magazine, pillows, chairs. All of it passed through the ghost and crashed into the wall behind it, significantly damaging the beautiful wallpaper and plaster. Understanding the futility of his efforts, Harry jumped to the window and forcefully pulled down the heavy curtains. The curtain, holding the curtains, fell to the floor with a crash, and the morning sunlight flooded the entire room. Harry froze in place, breathing heavily, while the black cloak recoiled from the light, retreating into the wall where various objects had just flown. Not having time to catch his breath, our ghost hunter rushed to his girlfriend, who stood slightly alive. But she was alive and unharmed, and that was the most important thing. He hugged her tightly, kissed her, then began shaking her shoulders, trying to bring her out of her stupor. Finally, he succeeded, and Emily began sobbing, and a nervous tremor ran through her body. It was a good sign. Harry sat her in a chair, inexplicably picked up the gun from the floor, loaded a magazine into it, almost instinctively, as there was no use for firearms now. Suddenly, an idea struck Harry. He had the keys, the storm and rain had subsided, and it was already bright outside. These entities didn't like the sun, so there should be nothing threatening them outside. The path to salvation was open, and it led through the window. Harry opened it and peered outside. It was quite high. He wasn't worried about himself, as he had done this yesterday, but Emily would find it challenging. Then Harry's gaze fell on the chair near the door. He quickly dragged it to the window and, with considerable effort, hoisted it onto the windowsill. With a sharp shoulder movement, he pushed it down to the ground. The chair landed outside the window. Now it could be used as a step for evacuating Emily. Approaching his beloved, he helped her stand up from the couch and, holding her elbow, led her to the window. Then he assisted her in descending, holding her hands directly onto the chair on the ground. Only when her feet touched the ground did he breathe a sigh of relief. Now it was his turn. Without wasting any time, Harry tossed his backpack out of the window and jumped out after it. Harry acted quickly and composedly. Shoving the still disoriented and bewildered Emily into the car, he literally jumped into the driver's seat, inserted the key into the ignition, and sped away as if he were a professional racer at the starting line. Only when the old house disappeared from view did Harry allow himself to relax and reduce the speed. Now they were safe. But this is not the end of the story. "I'll be back to figure things out with you," thought Harry, and as his car, kicking up dust, moved further away from the old mysterious house, he pondered what other mysteries might await him in the future.